After pounding the northern Caribbean islands and the Florida Keys, Hurricane George is now churning in the Gulf of Mexico, threatening the central Gulf Coast states. Good evening and welcome to Weather Center. I'm Dave Schwartz, in for Christina Abernathy. Evacuation orders are in effect tonight for many areas from Louisiana to the Florida Panhandle. For more on the hurricane, we turn now to SHARON RESULTAN for a complete update.
Thanks, Dave. Category 2, actually a very strong Category 2 in the Gulf of Mexico. That's what we're working with at this time. And folks all along the Gulf Coast were in preparation mode on Saturday. I'll show you some scenes as we take you into New Orleans. Sandbag walls are going up in New Orleans, hoping to hold back floodwater should Hurricane George zero in on this area. New Orleans is prone to flooding because of its low elevation. Pumping stations are used on a regular basis to help manage rising water. Dorms at the University of New Orleans, which is near Lake Pontchartrain, were being evacuated Saturday just as a precaution. Let's show you the very latest here on Hurricane George as of 10 o'clock Central Daylight Time. It is located 275 miles southeast of New Orleans. Sustained winds of 110 miles per hour. Again, a very powerful Category 2 on the threshold of a major hurricane, a Category 3. It's moving to the northwest at 10. The central pressure 969 millibars. As we look at the hurricane watches and warnings, you can see that they stretch across a good chunk of the Gulf Coast here. A reminder that hurricane warning means that hurricane conditions are a very real possibility within the next 24 hours. And we do think that those conditions that you have there all across the Gulf Coast are likely to deteriorate as we work our way into Sunday. Joining me now live is our meteorology supervisor, Stu Ostro. Stu has been watching this ever since its birth, September 15th in the eastern Atlantic. It's had quite a history and unfortunately has claimed over 300 lives in the Caribbean. We don't want to see anything like that as we watch this thing churn in the Gulf of Mexico. We want to keep you folks safe. So best word of advice, of course, is to pay close attention to all the warnings and keep it tuned here. And you're going to tell us a little bit about some of the trends we've seen. Very little fluctuation in intensity this evening.
It's a good news, bad news kind of situation at the moment. The good news is, even though the hurricane appears to have tried to strengthen during the evening, it has not been successful. The bad news is that potential still exists, and even if it doesn't, we're still talking about a major weather force to be reckoned with. Okay,
let's look at the satellite picture, and this is one of the fluctuations we've seen. It's here, it's not here. It's I'm talking about the eye, and it's barely visible at this point. What kind of changes are happening here that it's been undergoing for the past several hours?
Well, it's been trying to maintain an eye wall, which is the band of very strong squalls right around the eye. It has not been completely successful. It's that way for an hour or so, and then it has a little trouble. Appears as if some of the dry air that's been around the periphery of the storm at some level of the atmosphere, and also some sinking air, has been entrained in at times, and that has been an impediment to any potential intensification. We'll just have to wait and see whether it's able to win the battle or not.
The official forecast is still for it to strengthen, so we want to not scare people out there, but just let them know that that potential is still there for some intensification. We've seen a few of the rain bands moving northward. Looks like that's over for much of the night, perhaps. Things quieting down, but we don't want you to get into a false sense of security. There are still some pretty gusty winds around this. As a matter of fact, if you look at the wind profile, look at that. This is a huge storm.
It is. It is a large hurricane, a large expanse of tropical storm force winds, 39 miles per hour or higher. We did have a few outer squalls come on shore earlier, and they seem to be aided by some factors along the coast. They've pretty much dissipated, so we'll have to wait for some of these other squalls to come on shore, but it's not too far off the coast. We do have that large area of hurricane force winds too, so as the center of circulation heads toward shore, anywhere within the hurricane area, as you mentioned, needs to prepare for hurricane conditions, and also there is just that narrowing window of opportunity to complete preparations. It looks like for most of the coast, particularly in southeast Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, through the night and on to the beginning of the daylight hours, you'll be okay, but then as we head on a little bit later into Sunday, and certainly Sunday night, things are going to go downhill rapidly.
All right, let's go ahead and show folks a radar perspective from the Doppler radar, and that will give you a better insight where the center of circulation is, and you can see that down in this region. And obviously those bands are still some distance offshore, but we should mention that with some of the squalls that moved through earlier, some areas have already had up to 30, 35 mile per hour wind gusts. Will they see that sort of thing tonight?
Well, it looks like with some of this getting a little closer to the coast, St. George Island, Cape San Blas in here may see the wind and the rain pick up a little bit. The areas over here will take a little longer simply because they're farther away from the center of circulation. This is the eye wall that we mentioned on the satellite photo, and we do see it's not a complete ring. On the one hand, that might be because it's so far away from the radar site. On the other hand, we did see it on the west side earlier, and it's disappeared now. So it's another sign of the struggle the hurricane is having. But as these echoes progress on toward the coast, that's why we do expect things to start deteriorating as time goes on.
Okay, let's show folks the possible storm path here. And you talked about, first of all, the dry air that's been kind of entraining in, and you might be able to see some of that on the water vapor imagery.
Yeah, we can see some of this darkness in here, which is associated with some dry air. As far as the steering flow goes, we have this weather system out here, another one coming over the top, some big storms in upstate New York tonight. That steering flow, however, even this part of it in here, is pretty far removed from the hurricane. We have a ridge of high pressure to the north of it, and it looks like that's going to block any quick exit. So as it comes on shore, it very possibly could slow down. Devastating
flooding could result from that, so we do need to watch it very closely. Once again, there's a look at your projected path, folks. If you're watching from Mobile or New Orleans, anywhere in there, this is the area with the margin of error included, where we might see this thing finally making landfall. And note, too, that we may be talking about a Category 3. That's a possibility.
We might, and with that large wind field, another thing we'd want to point out is anywhere along the Gulf Coast we could see rough surf and rip currents, and we don't want anybody to get hurt just from frolicking in the waves either.
And don't go past knee deep.
No.
All right. Thank you very much, Stu Astro, for that report. And a reminder, too, that if you'd like further information about George or the rest of the nation's weather, you can always reach us online 24 hours a day on weather.com. Back to the studio now with Dave.
Thank you, Sharon. In addition to our hurricane, the severe thunderstorms to which Stu made reference here just a moment ago, and an upper-level disturbance over the Sierra Nevada mountains here in California, responsible for several funnel clouds over Lake Tahoe this afternoon, as reported by some fisher men and I guess fisher women. But here in the southern New England, you can forget this is out. But from my hand eastward, a severe thunderstorm watch is in effect. That's for all of Massachusetts, most of Connecticut, and Storm Watch is sponsored by Honda Generators. I'm Dave Schwartz. It's 9 minutes now before the hour, and as you well know, the weather in the tropics is very active. We've got 3 hurricanes and 1 tropical storm in the Atlantic Basin. Let's have a look at it, plus some severe weather over New York State and Connecticut. We lead off with the tropics, and you can see all 4 organized tropical systems. We've got the G, the I, J, and K tropical systems. I skipped the H because Tropical Storm Hermine developed quickly. It moved inland last week, and that was it. But George developed as a tropical depression near Africa on the 15th of September. That's the G. Then we skip over the H to I. That's Ivan. Tropical Storm Ivan is becoming extratropical now. And then we've got a couple of hurricanes. This is Hurricane Jeanne moving to the northwest. This will encounter a trough of low pressure and weaken. And then there is, I believe that's Hurricane Karl. We'll get a look at it in just a second. That's the remnants of a swirl of showers near Wilmington, North Carolina last week. It moved eastward and strengthened out over the Gulf waters here, the Gulf Stream, that shoot right on out toward Ireland and Great Britain. Let's start close to home with Hurricane George, and there it is. There's our 11-day trip across the Atlantic Ocean, obliterating many people's homes here in Puerto Rico, in Dominican Republic, Haiti, skirting across the north coast of Cuba, you'll remember, slamming the Keys, and then now out into the east central Gulf of Mexico. And it has a lot of people out here very concerned, and rightly so. It's packing 110-mile-per-hour winds, and the forecast track continues it moving northwest, and that would bring it into southeastern Louisiana. The timetable is still somewhat unclear because it is forecast to slow down as it heads toward the coast, and that would be just disastrous with regard to the water, the storm surge, and the wave action here pounding the coast, and also the heavy rain that hurricanes and tropical storms bring in from the tropics. Hurricane warnings in effect Morgan City right around to New Orleans and Lake Pontchartrain, and then eastward through Panama City, Florida. East of there, it's a tropical storm warning or a hurricane watch. Take your pick. Here it is. There's the eye coming into view from time to time. This is where the heaviest rain is and all those tropical storm, and then get closer to the hurricane force winds. A lot of high thin cirrus clouds, no precipitation falling right now anywhere along the Gulf Coast. But you better believe when this thing gets closer, the rainfall will pick up in intensity, and so will the wind. Fortunately, that rain offshore of Tampa, we should have at least some sunshine for you folks on Sunday. Further out, it's Hurricane Karl. There it is, moving to the northeast, away from land. 105 miles an hour. That's almost as strong as George. Ivan, the final advisory, as that hooks up with a cold front, 70 miles per hour and weakening. And then Hurricane Jeanne, 80 miles per hour. They say it's moving north-northwest, but it appears to be moving west. It may resume in north-northwest to track later on tonight or tomorrow, but it's way out in the middle of nowhere. And, of course, our hurricane close to home. Then we head to the northeast, where a bunch of thunderstorms rumbled across Michigan and then put a lot of rain down here in New York State. Look at that. That's the rain. Now the storms are heading into southern New England, where a severe thunderstorm watch is in effect now for Litchfield County, Connecticut, and to Berkshire County here in western Massachusetts. Strong winds and some heavy rain. Batten down the hatches. More on George next.
It's high alert as Hurricane George brings the threat of powerful winds and flooding to the Gulf Coast. Expert analysis of where and when it could make landfall next on Weather Center.
This program was sponsored by Honda Generators. Power when you really need it.
There are some people who prefer to be left in the dark. But if you prefer the light, you need a Honda generator. They're easy to start, efficient, and quiet. But best of all, they're reliable.
Honda. That thing always works.
Coast states potentially shortly. Good evening. Welcome to Weather Center. I'm Paul EMMICK. Evacuation orders are in effect for many parts of Louisiana to the Florida Panhandle. For more on this storm, we now turn to Warren Madden for a complete update. Warren.
Thanks very much, Paul. The path of Hurricane George over the last 11 days or so has been amazingly consistent. All in all, pretty much from the time it formed off the Cape Verde Islands, it has traveled on a pretty much due straight west-northwest path across the Caribbean, across Puerto Rico, Hispaniola, Cuba, across the Florida Keys. Now it's in the Gulf of Mexico, taking dead aim on the general area of the mouth of the Mississippi River. Let's take a look at the latest advisory out of the National Hurricane Center, show you the latest stats on it. We're expecting a new advisory in at any time, and we'll bring that to you as soon as we receive it. But as of 10 p.m. Central Daylight Time, top winds on Hurricane George placed at 110 miles an hour. That is just shy of Category 3 on the Saffir-Simpson scale, a major hurricane. Pressure at 969 millibars in the center of the system, about 275 miles southeast of New Orleans, Louisiana, and it's moving northwest at 10 miles an hour. We can show you the watches and warnings that are currently in effect. We have hurricane warnings up from Morgan City all the way over to Panama City. That means hurricane conditions are expected within the next 24 hours. On the west side of that, from Intracoastal City to Morgan City, there's a hurricane watch. From Panama City to St. Mark's, it's a hurricane watch and a tropical storm warning. Right smack in the middle of it all, New Orleans, Louisiana. And here, sandbag walls are going up, hoping to hold back floodwater should Hurricane George zoom in on this area. New Orleans is prone to flooding because of its elevation, or should we say its lack of elevation. Lots of the city is below sea level. Pumping stations are used on a regular basis to help manage rising water. Dorms at the University of New Orleans, which is near Lake Pontchartrain, were being evacuated Saturday as a precaution. Joining me right now is senior meteorologist Colin Marquis as we proceed through the night as George makes its final approach in toward the Louisiana coast. And we've seen some strengthening and weakening of the storm, but all in all, it's pretty much maintained its average strength right around in a high Category 2 state.
This has been a very interesting hurricane in that respect. You hit it right on the head, Warren. We have had some indications earlier on this afternoon. We had pressure drop of 6 or 7 millibars in a short period of time. But then it actually came up a little bit and leveled off. And all in all, when we look at the long haul, George has been very, very stable and has maintained its current strength right around just at the cusp between Category 2 and Category 3.
And we can see this as we go to the satellite picture. We'll show you here. You can see we've seen the eye pop in and pop out once again. It looks like it's starting to close up a little bit. The central core of the storm pretty well organized, but we're still noticing that the western side of it isn't nearly as developed as the eastern side.
We had some concerns, and we still do, that there's some dry air on the western side of the storm, and that continues to be drawn into the western and southwestern part of the circulation. And we think that that's probably the reason that it is not strengthening rapidly, because most indications in the atmosphere are favorable for the strengthening of this storm. But we think that that may be the one inhibiting factor, and that's very, very good news for the folks along the central Gulf Coast.
As we look at what's happening now on the radar, we'll go in and take a peek at the radar, and we can see those feeder bands offshore here. We've seen a little bit of rain drifting through the New Orleans area, but most of the main area of rain offshore. Now, one of the big concerns with this system is that if this thing slows down as it comes in and parks itself over the area of mouth of the Mississippi, we're talking about the potential for just tremendous amounts of rainfall.
Latest indications from our models are that, and by the way, the fixes from the plane indicate that it's just slowing down a little bit. The indications are that it will move up here by later tomorrow afternoon and then slow down tremendously, and that would be very, very bad news, because we'd get a combined effect of throwing water in from the east toward New Orleans and Lake Pontchartrain, for instance, and then you have the added on to that, you have the very heavy rainfall, and in some cases, we think that some areas in Louisiana may be seeing 10, 20, maybe even more inches of rain from this system through the next couple of days.
As we go to our path graphic here, you can see that we do have our area, our cone of possibilities here, but it is pretty much centered right on the mouth of the Mississippi, and certainly this is terrible news for the New Orleans area, because after all, this area was deluged with rain from Tropical Storm Francis not too long ago.
Now, the official track is basically bisecting this cone here, and that's the general direction we expect the storm to head off. There still obviously is some uncertainty as we head out in time. If the storm happens to pass a little bit east of New Orleans, that would be actually just a few miles. That would make quite a difference for the folks there. So we'll watch that. But current indications are that it'll head toward New Orleans and over the next 12 to 24 hours.
Okay, well, Colin, thanks for joining us. We'll be checking in with Colin throughout the night as time goes on and George draws closer in. Well, I'd like to let you know that if you have to be away from your TV and you'd like to get more information on what's happening with George, tune into our website. Point the browser at weather.com. Latest advisory coming out anytime. We'll have it for you as soon as it does. But now let's take it back to the studio and get the latest on some stormy weather, particularly in the Northeast, with Paul Emmick.
All right, thanks so much, Warren. Pretty active night, I'd say so. Yeah, Northeast, we're dealing with many, many storms. Also, still some lingering storms into parts of Michigan. We're not out of the woods yet. The front is on the move, bringing about some cooler air, but ahead of it, pretty warm, pretty sticky, and it's getting a nudge, getting a bit of a kick. We're kicking off some storms still in Michigan tonight. Right now, though, I want to point out where we have a severe thunderstorm watch in effect. This yellow shaded area, including big chunks of Connecticut, Massachusetts, even to Rhode Island, and portions of Vermont and New Hampshire as well. A number of severe cells have been popping up. Now, earlier tonight, it was pretty much a pretty severe night into Michigan. Incredible winds, even some 80-mile-an-hour wind gusts, some incredible hail. like around Gaylord, Michigan. That has moved on, but right into Benzie County, just off to the west of Traverse City. Severe thunderstorm warning in effect here. You can still see some gusty winds, pretty strong winds, and the potential for hail and some soaking rains, too. Into New York State, again, a lot of the heaviest of the storms are moving away right now. But into, well, for example, eastern Ulster County, like around Kingston, also Dutchess County, and on to Litchfield County, Connecticut, which, of course, is just a little bit to the west of Hartford. Right in there, we have this cell moving in with a severe thunderstorm warning. Need to be careful, seek shelter, take precautions here, because they're dealing with a pretty wild night. Looks like some of the rain will move on through, then we'll still see a lingering chance of storms during our day on Sunday. Could be seeing some strong to severe weather in the northeast. Of course, big potential for isolated tornadoes exists anytime a tropical system interacts with land. And that, of course, the problem here with Hurricane George. Otherwise, what were our other problems? Well, indeed, we had a lot of record highs, some incredible heat. But as our front moves through, we'll bring an end to that. But the heat is still going to be up ahead of the front, including New York City and Boston. We could get into some record territory ourselves. Where were the records for Saturday? Even Detroit had one, Chicago had one. Milwaukee, we had a record. Asheville, North Carolina, even Lansing. But all that will change as some cool...
After pounding the northern Caribbean islands and the Florida Keys, Hurricane George is now churning a frothy wake in the Gulf of Mexico, threatening the central Gulf Coast states. Good evening. Welcome to Weather Center. I'm Dave Schwartz. Evacuation orders are in effect for many areas from Louisiana to the Florida Panhandle. For more on the hurricane, we turn now to Warren Madden for a complete update.
Thanks very much, Dave. Have in my hands the new advisory from the National Hurricane Center as of 1 a.m. and pretty much status quo. Not much in the way of changes to either the forecast track, the strength, or the central pressure of Hurricane George, remaining a fairly consistent storm over the last couple of days with its path and its strength. Let's take a look at the latest advisory now. As of 1 a.m. Central Daylight Time, top winds still at 110 miles an hour, path still northwest at about 10 miles an hour, although the National Hurricane Center does say that it is possible we could see a decrease in forward speed over the next 24 hours. Central pressure has been wavering within about, say 5 millibars, plus or minus 970, pretty much all day, so we're really not seeing a lot of changes in strength. The distance is closing, though. Now 240 miles southeast of New Orleans, that's the center of circulation. For a little bit different perspective, that is about 160 miles southeast of the mouth of the Mississippi River. So the system is getting closer. Let's take a look at the hurricane watches and warnings that are out from Morgan City around to Pensacola. Hurricane warnings posted. That means that hurricane conditions are expected within the next 24 hours. On the east and west side, hurricane watches out. And from Panama City around to St. Mark's, there is also a tropical storm warning out. Right smack dab in the middle, New Orleans, under the gun and preparing. Sandbag walls going up in New Orleans as people are hoping to hold back floodwaters should George zoom in on this area. New Orleans is prone to flooding. You see these floodgates? Much of New Orleans below sea level. These students at the University of New Orleans, which is near Lake Pontchartrain, were being evacuated on Saturday as a precaution in case Hurricane George does come into the area and causes flooding. Joining me right now here in the Forecast Center is senior meteorologist Colin Marquis, and the new advisory really not changing all that much. We're seeing pretty much the same path as we've seen before.
Right. In the short term, this storm has taken some turns and it's dropped in central pressure. It's intensified a little bit and then it's weakened a little bit. But if you take a look at the long haul, particular today, since beginning of today, and you go back and look, it's been very consistently strong Category 2 storm, and the path has been a constant northwest at about 10 miles per hour once you take out all of the little jogs here and there. But over the long haul, it is moving very consistently northwest, and on that path, it's heading straight for the city of New Orleans.
Pretty much so. Let's take a look at the satellite picture. We can show you what the situation is right now. Still seeing a pretty compact center here. The eye fading in and out. The Air Force Reserve hurricane hunters reporting on the last pass through that the eye wall was open a bit to the west, but still seeing an eye in the area, and we are seeing still a fair amount of convection on the east side of the storm, but not as much on the western side.
And that has been typical of this hurricane since for the last 2 or 3 days anyway, where the main activity has been over here. And as I mentioned last time around, some buoys out in this vicinity, south of Pensacola, are already reporting seas about 30 feet and already reporting gusts above 60 miles an hour. So they're definitely picking up the winds in here and conditions deteriorating, and it's conditions like that that will be moving into the central Gulf Coast later on tomorrow, and particularly tomorrow night.
Now, we talk about the storm moving in a particular direction, but we have to realize that the hurricane does not move of its own volition. It is moved around by the upper air patterns and the weather systems that are around it. And we wanted to take a little bit of a broader perspective here so we could show you some of those factors that are affecting the movement of Hurricane George.
This is the water vapor imagery, and the darker areas are the drier areas in the mid and upper levels, but they are indicative of sinking air. And we have a ridge of high pressure north of the storm, and the air is sinking or subsiding, and that is holding the storm on a northwesterly course. It is not allowing it to turn to the north. The other thing here is we have also an area of subsidence on the west side, and some of that subsiding air or dry air is being drawn into the circulation. We think that's keeping the storm in check and not allowing it to really intensify rapidly. But the major thing to take out of this exercise here is that the high is not retreating, it is not weakening, and that's why we think that this storm should continue on its present course on off to the northwest.
And one of the other factors that goes in on this is that as that system moves in closer on in, as long as that high remains in place here to the north, that's one of the reasons we think the system could slow down, and that could be some really bad news in terms of rainfall into the New Orleans area.
And the official track still does take it toward the mouth of the Mississippi River along about this time tomorrow night, or a little bit earlier, actually during the evening hours. And we think through some of the indications from the models that it will probably slow down in its forward speed, and that could cause some problems as far as excessive rainfall.
We wanted to let you know that you still have some time, probably early on Sunday morning, to get some last-minute preparations done in this area before Hurricane George makes its last run in toward land. We already have the hurricane warning issued in this area, so protect your windows with shutters or plywood. Get anything loose that could be flying around outside, get it under cover, get it inside. You don't want that stuff flying around. Fill containers with drinking water, and fill your bathtub with water for sanitary use, because in many areas it is likely you may lose water service. Colin, thanks for checking in with us. We'll be back with you in about a half an hour as we continue through the night with updates on Hurricane George and its progress across the Gulf of Mexico. But if you have to be away from your TV, there is another way you can get some information on what's happening with the hurricane and weather across the nation. That's our website. The address, weather.com. Let's head back now into the studio and get the latest on the weather across the nation. Check your forecast for your Sunday with Dave Schwartz.
Thanks, Warren. In addition to our hurricane looming out here to the southeast, there are storm clouds from the Great Lakes into New England here tonight. An upper-level disturbance over California causing some rain and snow, and a weak disturbance over Kansas City. We've had some showers here, but it's generally here and there. Those are our two foci here tonight, this Saturday morning and Saturday night and Sunday morning. There is a severe thunderstorm watch in the area of southern New England right now, but I don't see much in the way of severe weather. I would imagine that this would be discontinued here fairly shortly, but there is one severe thunderstorm now that is it's headed down towards Bridgeport, and this could have some damaging winds and hail with it, so watch this over the next half hour. That shall move over Long Island Sound and then hit Long Island east of Islip, or just to the east of Islip. It'll be a very close call. You'll want to watch out for this out on Long Island. This system actually developed over the Great Lakes here earlier today, whipped across southern Ontario, crossed the state of New York, and then into southern New England.